Halloween was always different for me. Instead of costumes and candy, the night of Old Hallows Eve was spent in the murk of the scariest places I could find. Urban exploration with a predictable twist. Abandoned asylums, gold rush era mine shafts, forests that were hotbeds of paranormal activity. Once I even found myself in the scorched basement of a high-rise building that had caught fire and had 32 people perish in its flames. But all those pale in comparison to this year's trip, because those places can be left behind. Coronado will stay with me until my dying breath. The Coronado military complex was not a place meant for life. Hugging the coastline of far North California, veiled by towering redwood forest, hundreds of feet underground, this complex got its start as a Cold War-era project that was shut down sometime in the 80s, until it was repurposed from 2002 to 2007. It had been left to rot ever since. This is all conjecture, of course. Coronado's facilities and operations are clandestine. We only knew of Coronado because of my friend and exploration partner, Mark. He's a freelance journalist who had gotten into contact with a local, willing to be our guide. We'd be killing two birds with one stone, a Halloween to remember for me, and an article to serve as Mark's holiday special. Whatever caused the abandonment of 2007 must have been severe enough for a hasty evacuation. They only had time to collapse the 3 maintenance tunnels and part of the main tunnel into the greater complex. Power and water were never cut, so the 700 feet of sloping tunnel into the main entrance soon became a hub for the community of bohemians and vagrants that occupied it. If you want a picture of what the settlement looks like, picture any major California underpass. The tents, billowing smoke from trash fires, open drug use. Coronado's got it all, except everyone's hooked up to a dangerous amount of extension cords. That might have been enough for a story, or a trip, but Mark and I were searching for that which straddles the edge of periphery. Deep within the bowels of Coronado lies a decades-long mystery, and it would have stayed buried for uncountable years if it had not been for the efforts of one man. Sergio Martin spent the last 12 years slowly cleaning out the rubble of the northernmost maintenance tunnel, until a few months ago, he gained entrance into the facility. The next few weeks spent exploring the compound led to discoveries so unsettling, he had no choice but to try to bring it to the media. We met him on the outskirts of the maintenance tunnel, tall and brawny, with long gray hair pulled back into a ponytail. The man looked exhausted. You weren't my first pick, you know. Last, actually. Went to the Times and the Post. All of them. Rejected unilaterally. So I kept going down the list until I was short of calling up the National Enquirer. How's that figure? You're just above them? He asked Mark. Well, Sergio, I'd wonder what kept them from such a juicy story. Honest opinion, I think they're scared. They have a memo that's passed around saying stay the hell out of Coronado. But that's not stopping me. It's not stopping me from trying to get the word out. Even if it's a small magazine like yours. Paranormal, is that your angle? As long as it's out there, it'll get traction and slowly people will come to know Coronado. I'm a freelancer. The publication I run isn't limited to the paranormal. I cover any oddity that comes my way. I'm eager to see what Coronado has in store for us. Don't be, Sergio grunted, gesturing for us to follow. Mark and I exchanged a look of wordless skepticism and trailed him until we came to the threshold of the tunnel. Large slabs of collapsed concrete barred the entrance, except for a small sliver. Light beamed out from within, and with a nod, Sergio led the way. It was a squeeze getting through. Into the chamber beyond, shelf-lined and cavernous. It was obviously a storage area, still lit by overhead fluorescents. We walked through into a larger room that looked like barracks stripped of their bedding, and beyond that was a central hub that split off into further corridors and rooms. So far, nothing stood out about the complex, sparsely decorated and industrial. a collection of concrete columns, brutalist architecture, and rusty scenes. A wooden table awaited us. Atop it were a few files and an old desktop computer. Sergio's gaze laid upon them. I walked forward and picked up the first folder, dated 1987, and with Mark peering over my shoulder, began to read it. Sergio theorized it had been left over from when it was first abandoned, and upon reuse in the 2000s, the files had been recompiled and heavily redacted. Reading through, I wasn't able to piece together anything cohesive. What I transcribed below is what is most legible and relevant. Note that these are mere sentence fragments. The majority of the documents were blacked out. Link with variable aspect, gate established. No discernible pattern for its function intervals. Emergent phenomenon increasing. Heightened security protocols approved. Cannot be effectively contained or utilized. No meaningful contingencies are viable. Existing protocols are mere formalities for the behalf of the unbriefed. I glared at Mark, who shrugged in response, unfazed by the mounting skepticism. He merely gestured to the next file. This one was more recent, dated 2006. It only had 3 photos, each with some text scribbled on the back in pen. The first photo was of a charred corpse. Its face had been censored out by a black bar. It hardly made a difference, as the burns were so severe, the body might have well been carbonized. The back of the photo had a single phrase: aftermath of contact with subject 12A. I picked up the next photo, flinched away at its gruesome nature, and forced myself to take a second and third look. Mark could only stare at it, transfixed. A room of eviscerated bodies, rags of flesh and entrails strewn about. Crimson stained all surfaces, and a pile of limbs lay at its center. Atop the hill of limbs, a scalped head was laid atop, eyes obscured by a black censor bar. The back of the photo held the descriptor, possible indicator of intelligence and attempt of communication. Flipping the photo back around and scanning the scene for a final time, I saw it. A crude drawing etched out in blood on the adjacent wall. A stick figure with no features beside 2 beady eyes. I practically threw down the photograph and moved on to the final one. I got the impression that it was taken hastily, in the throes of fear. The background was blurry and overexposed. The facility wall, shocked white. The void black stain as forefront was just off-center. I thought it was nothing more than a smudge. But the more I looked at it, the more definition it took. There was something angular in its form, poised and predatory looking. Maybe it was a glitch or my mind trying to make sense of what was nothing more than an indescribable blur. But with every passing moment, I could not help but feel as if some hidden dimension of form was scraping the surface of my psyche. I flipped over the picture and read this single word printed on the back. Juvenile. Mark's expression confirmed that it wasn't just in my head. What the hell are these? I asked Sergio. He shrugged and spoke. No idea. I have theories, but might be better left after you've gotten a better scope of the place. Come on. I think you should see the rest of the place before I show you what's on the computer. As we followed him, Mark took the initiative to ask how he came to Coronado. I was a professor once. You know, computer science. 2008 hit me hard. Harder than most. Lost the house, my kids, my wife, and my job. So I went north with nothing but a pack and my Camry. Found Coronado through a friend I made along the way. Was good back then, before it started getting crowded, before the fights for space got frequent. Even then there was something off. At night, reverberating off concrete, you'd hear things coming from deep within the complex. So I picked a tunnel and started digging, chipping away at the rubble every day. Those days turned into weeks, then months, until years passed by. Until finally, Sergio led us into another sloping tunnel, down into a lower level, then past the central chamber into a side room. The stench was the first thing that hit me, sharp and putrid, the perfume of suffering and decay. Lit by the dimmed fluorescence, a long corridor-like room, lined with dozens of beds on both sides, stood before me. Leather straps were fixed on each bed, and upon further examination, the tears and wrinkles revealed what must have been years of struggle. The last bed on the left still had its bedding, scrunched together and soaked through with old blood. The smell wafting off of it caused an involuntary shudder to echo throughout my body, as I got a taste of the untold agonies that had occurred here. He then led us into a small room that must have been a cell. Its door was sealed and reinforced. 6 inches of plexiglass that had a sizable hole punched through let us peer into the room within, barren except for the deep groves and slashed gouges deep into the concrete. Mark started to ask about it, but Sergio cut him off. "No idea. Come on, more to see this way." Once more, he led us to the central chamber, and towards the northern end, where a towering concrete double door barred entrance into what was surely the deepest part of the facility. There was no locking mechanism. With enough strength and leverage, one could haul the doors open. "What's that?" I asked Sergio. "Think it's the aforementioned aspect gate. Took weeks for me to work up the courage to pry it open and peer inside. Nothing but a brick wall beyond. A friend from the camp once took a trip down here. Swore to me that when he opened it, there was a dirt wall. He could have been on something at the time that deceived his eyes." "I want to take a look at what's on the computer," Mark cut in. Sergio nodded, and we trekked back to the desk a floor above us. Sergio had been able to extract some of the files through an exploit in the older computer systems. Though most of the data was half corrupted, there were a few surviving memos that stood out. 06-13-2003. Expedition 3C ended in near abject failure. 11 of the 12 crew were killed or MIA. 1 male was recovered. It was initially thought he was unlikely to survive more than a week. Due to some, as of yet unknown, condition, his blood was altered. The coloration of his blood is as black as pen ink, and the viscosity of syrup. His blood type is now undefinable. Seminal fluid is also tar-like in color and viscosity. Further testing has been requested and is pending approval. 03-27-2004. No abnormalities in test group 776. All 14 were successfully implanted with variations of component alpha version 4. Predictably, tissue samples have been unilaterally rejected and led to sepsis, terminating survivors. Fluid changes have yielded promising results, but massive organ failure after 3 to 6 days is all but guaranteed. Embryonic forms have shown higher attachment rates to host bodies, but all end in premature death of the host, usually within 12 days. For this reason, the gestation period is still unknown. No preference for male or female host. The neck and chest appears to have the highest rate of successful attachment. The lack of new results with this latest sample has urged our directors to demand greater application of variables. All current subjects are to be terminated. Approval for subjects ages 12 and younger is pending approval. I formally submit possible variations in expectant mothers, preferably between 8 and 26 weeks. Addendum. Requests for both variables have been greenlit. Do you know how hard it is to pluck pregnant women off the streets and make sure no one will miss them? They're yours, but please be frugal. 09-19-2006. The increasing frequency of breach events has fast-tracked this project into early termination. 6 months is the best we can hope for now. In addition, all requests for new staff have gone ignored. Disposability is no longer a luxury we have. The only positive thing is we're on the cusp of a breakthrough. Now is not the time for caution. What the hell are we doing here? I asked. Want my opinion? Weapons development. Think about it, the Cold War arms race led to some colossally messed up discovery. They bury it for decades until the next big scare triggers yet another arms race, covert this time. They try and fail at controlling it, so they seal the place off, but also run for the hills because whatever they're messing with bites back hard enough to scare them badly. It's why they've never returned. Could have been an outpost of sorts. They do talk about expeditions. Maybe this is where they regroup and deploy, Mark said. Exploring what though? I asked. Don't think we'll ever know the truth of this place, Sergio replied. Mark turned to face me and spoke a single word. Gate. And wordlessly, we began the trek down. There it awaited us, like dual monoliths. And letting my touch rest on the cool rusted metal handles, I knew a great change was on the cusp of greeting us. Straining and grunting, we pried the gates open. I hoped to be met with a brick wall, a dirt barricade, an empty room. The gust of hot air that gasped out and washed over us dispelled any notions of being mundane. I didn't understand what I was witnessing at first. Like that stained photograph, it was as if my mind was shielding me from the horror of the truth. But as the shell-shocked seconds crept by, and understanding flushed over me, a scream caught on my throat. Pulsating flesh, deep crimson, blood vessels and capillaries. A hallway ring of muscle held the walls in place as they contracted and undulated. Squinting, daring to peek in, I saw occasional dangling light bulbs cast dim light across the expanse. I wondered if they had always been there, and the flesh grew over the hallway, or if they were part of the intestine itself. The corridor ended with another door, a simple red house door, with a brass handle that glinted its invitation. A fleeting moment of compulsion nearly caused me to walk across and answer its call, but a firm hand on my shoulder grounded me back to sanity. Mark's eyes were filled with horror, and without speaking, we both knew we had to leave. Scrambling back to the doors, we began the frantic push to seal the aspect gate. Our groans and efforts halted at a noise so subtle it might have gone unnoticed if our senses weren't on overdrive. A jiggle of a doorknob. The realization reignited our efforts, and we doubled the sail. Someone, something, was about to breach through the red door. Hurry up, Sergio hissed, as the creak of the door swinging open spiked panic and adrenaline throughout my being. Mark was throwing his full weight into the door, as the sound of the door creaking open drove me to do the same. The sickly squelch of steps, cautious at first, elicited a half scream from me. The thundering sound of something sprinting on organic tissue and fluids was the last push we needed to close the door in the moment that thing was about to emerge. A ghastly, gasping shriek tore through the corridor and assaulted us with images of the agony about to be inflicted. I lost the fight against the urge to look at it, but Sergio was faster, slamming into the gate and forcing it shut. Silence fell as soon as those doors closed. Sergio, what was that? Mark hissed, backing away frantically from the doors. I don't know. That's never happened before. Variables mess with him enough, and it might get a different outcome. We should leave now, I said. We emerged into the night sky, stars and moon masked by thick storm clouds, casting a shadow over us. So you'll write the article? Sergio asked nervously. Yeah. I'll omit some stuff and make sure no one finds this place. Don't think it's good for anyone to set foot in there. Yeah, you're probably right. I think I'll start looking for somewhere else to live. We parted ways with Sergio shortly after. The 3-hour drive home was silent, and when it came time for Mark to drop me off, he asked if he could crash. It's been days since, but neither one of us want to be alone. I don't think I'll be doing anything for Halloween next year. Mark and I had our fill last night. Northern California is Appalachia on the West Coast. Inexplicable occurrences, strange sightings, countless myths, and endless unsolved disappearances. I wonder what role Coronado has played in all of this, if any. I wonder if they were able to seal it back then, or something breached past into the world outside. And I wonder if our expedition has opened a door for whatever lies beyond the aspect gate.